ketogenic diet is not 80% fat. A ketogenic diet is not dependent on any macronutrient ratio. There is no magical macro ratio for keto. I just noticed how close I got in a fight with a tree yesterday, a ficus tree, and it nearly took my eyes out. Right there and right there. Crazy. So keto. A lot of people are doing a ketogenic diet for fat loss these days. I'd say at least 80% of the clients that come to me are doing keto for fat loss. Another 15 to 20% are doing keto to actually regenerate their health, to regenerate their capacity, their metabolic functionality, their metabolic flexibility. And a lot of those are former vegans, former vegetarians, coming from very nutrient depleted diets. In fact, it seems like the average former vegan and vegetarian seems to have a harder time with their health than the average standard American dieters these days. But most people doing keto, most of my clients are doing it for fat loss. And for fat loss, ketogenic diets are not 80% fat. So the keto cops are going to tell you, this isn't keto, that isn't keto. This is the magic ratio for keto. You've got to eat these foods and only these foods on keto. And I'll be the first one to tell you, that's a bunch of nonsense. There's 100 different ways to do a ketogenic diet. All a ketogenic diet is a diet that gets you into ketosis. What is ketosis? Well, when your body is deprived of carbohydrate, deprived's kind of a strong word because we don't need carbohydrate, but when we don't consume carbohydrate in a low carbohydrate state, our body will start to burn fat. Your body can burn fat from the body or from the plate. Now, a ketogenic diet was first introduced in the medical literature as a treatment for refractory epilepsy. Now, back in the 1920s, children with epilepsy who were resistant to drug treatment, it was found that these kids would respond very, very well to fasting and to carbohydrate restriction. So the ketogenic diet was named after these compounds in the blood that people called ketones. And they were present and were associated with more balanced neurochemistry and absence of seizures. So beta-hydroxybutyrate in the blood is the main ketone body that's measured to tell us if we're in ketosis or not. Ketosis is defined in the current medical literature as anything above 0.5 millimolars per deciliter of beta-hydroxybutyrate in the blood. So a ketogenic diet is a diet that puts you in ketosis. Now, of course, the medical ketogenic diet implemented in the 1920s was a very high-fat diet. This was a diet designed for children with epilepsy. You put a kid with epilepsy on a ketogenic diet, and they're going to have some side effects. What were those side effects? Well, one of the side effects is decreased hunger. Another side effect, stable blood glucose. Another side effect of keto, lower insulin levels. So many of these side effects, like decreased hunger, lower insulin levels, stable blood glucose, can be leveraged to lose body fat. But in the 1920s, these kids who had epilepsy already had major health issues, were already spending a lot of time in hospitals, and they would be very prone to nutrient deficiencies and to growth deficiencies. They just weren't developing like normal children. They were having developmental issues, and they needed a lot of caloric intake. So it was found that an 80% fat ratio in their diet, 80% of calories coming from fat, that's not the raw weight of your food being 80% fat, that's calories. Because remember, fat has 9 calories per gram, protein and carbohydrate 4 calories per gram. They put these kids on a very high fat diet, and it helped to reduce their seizures, and it allowed them to maintain their weight or even to gain weight. And in the search for a long-term solution to their epilepsy, it was discovered that this diet would work very well for many kids. Now, that's in the 1920s for growing children with epilepsy. The assumption that we need to extrapolate the same dietary dogma to people who are going for fat loss is misleading and kind of dumb. So if you're going for fat loss, a ketogenic diet is not going to look like a ketogenic diet used to treat refractory epilepsy in a child. If you're going for fat loss, your ketogenic diet the ratio of your macronutrients is not going to look like somebody who is trying to maintain or gain body weight. So it's all about the context. A ketogenic diet is any diet that gets you in ketosis. You can eat a diet that is almost all carbohydrate and get into ketosis. How is that? Well, imagine, and obviously I'm not saying you should do this, but I'm just pointing out that you could eat like 1 teaspoon of sugar every other day. If you do alternate day fasting, 1 teaspoon of sugar, you're going to be in ketosis pretty much all the time, but you're eating nothing but sugar. Say you just had one meal and it was basically just broccoli. Broccoli is like 90% water by weight, and I think it's like 7% carbohydrate and 3% protein, but that's an incomplete protein. It's not a complete protein, and it's not a complete amino acid profile. So it's basically all carbs and water. If you just ate 1 serving of broccoli in a day, you're gonna get into ketosis. If you continue that for several days, you're gonna be basically starving yourself, getting into deep autophagy, and you're gonna be into ketosis. And you're not eating any fat. You're just eating carbs. So obviously I'm not recommending anybody do that, but we've got to understand that ketosis is not achieved through the elevation of dietary fat. If the goal is fat loss, we must understand that there is body fat that we can burn, and then there is dietary fat we can burn. The body's not going to tap into body fat. The body's not going to tap into the endogenous fat stored and use that emergency tank of fuel if we're constantly putting in an exogenous source of energy, fat. So many people are making the mistake of starting a ketogenic diet and thinking that you've got to eat fat bombs, you've got to eat as much peanut butter as you can, you've got to get in as much fat as you possibly can, MCT oil, exogenous ketones, that it's all just about your ketone levels. And that's another misleading, but very convenient for marketers, scam. Right? You don't need to be measuring your blood ketones all the time. Now, if you're doing a ketogenic diet for medical purposes, if you're a cancer patient, if you have epilepsy, obviously measuring ketones may be beneficial and staying in that optimal range, much like Andrew Scarborough has talked about on our channel over the years. Andrew Scarborough, who uses a 0-carb ketogenic diet. One of the original carnivore dieters, doing a carnivore diet before anyone called it carnivore. Andrew Scarborough was eating cricket flour 5 years ago. Right, now he uses a medical ketogenic diet as to treat his epilepsy after having a brain tumor, a very aggressive brain tumor, supposedly incurable, which was removed and hasn't come back over the years. He's been doing fantastic with his diet. Now Andrew eats higher fat and wants to maintain a stable blood ketone and glucose level, and he finds that there's an optimal range for ketosis for him. Another interesting thing that he does find, though, is even on his medical ketogenic diet, he finds that his seizure threshold has improved over the years and the ketone levels have become less relevant. Now, there's several reasons why this could be, and we could only speculate, but it might be that he's more efficiently using ketones and they're not just flooding his blood. Because remember, in the beginning of a ketogenic diet, you're going to be pissing out ketones. Literally. People are peeing on these little pee strips, getting piss all over their fingers. Ooh, I'm in ketosis, it turned purple. Well, that really doesn't mean anything. In the beginning of a ketogenic diet, your body is often flooded with these ketones and doesn't know how to use them. We have to generate more mitochondria to use these ketones. We have to develop the machinery to actually process this fuel source, and it takes time. It takes some time to do this. In fact, it takes a few weeks for most people to get adapted to ketosis. During the first few weeks of a ketogenic diet, most people probably should eat a little bit higher fat than if they're going for fat loss than they'll be eating later. All right, so if you're going for a ketogenic diet for fat loss, what I want you to remember is this. The first thing you want to do is get sufficient protein. To make it simple, we can define sufficient protein as about 0.8 grams per pound of your lean body mass or your desired lean body mass, right? So if you got 100 pounds to lose, you don't want to use your current projected lean body mass because you're going to be losing a lot of weight. Right? Much of your mass right now is just there to hold that extra fat. So 0.8 grams per pound of your lean body mass or your desired lean body mass. Easy way to go about getting sufficient protein. Most people are focusing so much on the fat to protein ratio that they get lost in the mire, they get totally confused, they get demoralized, and they don't realize that the crux of the diet is getting sufficient protein because that brings satiety. Of course, you do want to eat dietary fat. You don't want to just starve your body of fat and eat zero fat, which would be called a protein-sparing modified fast, and like bodybuilders and stuff use that to get super lean. You don't want to be doing that. You want to be eating some fat. In the beginning, your diet might look like 70 to 80% fat, but most people that obsess over the 80% fat ratio and are looking for fat loss end up stalling out and getting really confused and demoralized. So, as you get adapted to ketosis, get enough protein. Fat is your energy source, and of course keep those carbs low. Most people want to keep the carbs under 20 to 30 grams of net carbs. And those carbs should only come from vegetables that are non-glycemic. And the vegetables, many of us are finding, aren't even really necessary for health and well-being. That's a whole nother story. That has to do with this whole carnivore diet heresy that's freaking so many people out, that so many people are triggered about online right now. So ketogenic carnivore diet is something that's very viable and many people have been using successfully, including cancer patients like Andrew Scarborough. Of course, no diet is a cure-all, no diet's a magic panacea, but these can be powerful tools for fat loss and for therapeutic purposes. So get enough protein. Fat's your energy source. Carbs are not for fuel. Those are limited. We keep those super low. How much fat should you eat in the beginning? Like I said before, we don't want to overdo it on the fat. Some people can't digest all that fat when they first start out. And some people, especially if you've got a lot of weight to lose, you can jump into a diet that's ketotic, where you're getting sufficient protein and aren't adding exorbitant amounts of fat, and you can burn significant body fat and have very minimal difficulties in transition. I usually recommend about 1 to 1.5 grams of fat per gram of protein to start out, depending on the person. If you're not trying to lose body fat, if you're trying to gain weight or just regain metabolic health, then perhaps more fat would be required. Now in the beginning, I don't recommend restricting fat. Sometimes just doing fat to satiety while you get adapted for the first couple weeks is a good idea. Don't just focus on fat loss when you're starting out. Focus on getting adapted and building the habits that you can maintain long term. Because remember, short-term diets are long-term failures, and we have to understand that it is so important that we build a foundation of habits that we can maintain long-term if we want to maintain the progress we've made in our diet, with health, with fat loss, with improvements in metabolic flexibility, with improvements in cognition. We can't just think we're going to do keto for a few weeks, lose a bunch of weight, 12-week diet, and then I'm done. I'm going back to my normal diet, my standard American diet, right? That doesn't work. You got to make the habits. So learn to prepare nutrient-dense keto foods. Check out the link in the description. Our book, the Ketogenic Edge Cookbook, the training manual for low-carb, ketogenic, and paleo cuisine. My wife spent 1.5 years on this book, and it's all nutrient-dense, unrefined, whole foods keto. No junk food Quest bar bullshit. It's all real whole foods. There's even a whole section showing you how to prepare the most nutrient-dense parts of the animal, the organs, which people are finally catching on to how important these foods can be. All right, so the book is focused on nutrient-dense whole foods keto. Protein comes from something that had eyes or came from a shell, not from a powder, not from hydrolyzed pea protein powder or whey protein. Focus on real foods that actually bring you satiety. So check out the book, links in the bio or the description down below, and it's actually finally available in print. That'll help you to create the habits you need in food prep so that you can maintain this long term. You got to enjoy the foods you're making. If you wake up and you know exactly what you're going to have for breakfast, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to spend hours thinking about and preparing your food all the time. If you just make the habits, set those habits up. It takes about 21 days to rewire the central nervous system into a new habit. Physiologically, if you set yourself up with these habits of preparing your own foods every day, of getting enough protein, using fat for energy, and keeping those carbs low, you're not going to have to think about this long term and be obsessed with macronutrient ratios or how many grams of fat and protein you're eating every day. You're going to be able to do this like clockwork. You're just going to wake up and it's going to happen because the habits will be there. But it takes energy in the beginning, it takes willpower, and it takes application of your mind and your body to create those habits. So get enough protein. Fat's the energy source. If you're trying to burn body fat, forget about the 80% fat ratio. It is irrelevant. If you're trying to burn body fat, get enough protein. Protein's going to bring satiety. Ketosis is achieved through the restriction of carbohydrate, not the elevation of dietary fat. And you can burn fat from your plate or from your body. So quit listening to the keto repeatos who are trying to confuse and confound you. Much of the information out there is just repetitive crap that people are reading online from blogs that were put out 5, 6 years ago when keto first started finally getting some attention. Many people have just been repeating the same stuff ad nauseum. Keto for fat loss is not necessarily 80% fat. Forget about those ratios. Focus on getting enough protein and burning fat for fuel, fat coming from your plate or from your body. Build the habits that you can sustain and maintain and enjoy long term, and the fat will come off. Eating more fat doesn't make you burn more body fat. In fact, many of the clients that come to us, their problem is they've been overeating on fat and undereating on protein. And we do our Keto and Carnivore Collective, our community coaching. We've been doing it every month now. Actually kind of decreased the amount of private coaching clients that I take on, because we do get a lot of requests for private coaching, and we found a way that we can handle all the clientele that come to us, give it to you at a far better price, and give you a community-based setting, give you more time and energy, give you more content, more support in a fun community environment. So we do our Keto and Carnivore Collective every month. And I find that every single month, at least, well, I don't know what percentage, but a high percentage of people that come to us, especially ladies, are undereating on the protein, overeating on the fat, and are stalling their results with those simple mistakes. So in our Keto and Carnivore Collective, we work on establishing the dietary habits that you can maintain long term. If you want fat loss, we've got a lot of people doing it for fat loss. There are many people who actually do it for the metabolic health benefits, for improvements in cognition, and just for simplifying their life, right? So they don't have to worry about, what am I going to eat all the time? You create the habits, you build them in, you train yourself with those habits, you move forward, you enjoy. So we're going to do our next Keto and Carnivore Collective starting on December 9th. It's going to be December 9th through I think January 6th. You can sign up. There's a link down in the description below. If you do want private coaching, if you're shy and you don't like doing it in the community setting, if you just want to, meet via Skype, I still do private consultations, but I have decreased the amount of private clients I take on because I've only got so much time in the day. So the Keto and Carnivore Collective, great resource if you're trying to start out a ketogenic diet, or if you just want to refine your keto diet. We get a lot of vets who come in. We get a lot of coaches as well, or people who even get physicians in there, people who want to implement this in their own practice to help other people. Basically, our goal with this is to make you self-sustain in your diet and give you the tools you need to be able to help yourself and others, so you can pass on the knowledge, so we can help other people eat real foods and build real health and vitality in their body, so we can enjoy life. So anyways, you can find more at primaledgehealth.com. Keto isn't necessarily 80% fat. If you're trying to gain weight, maintain weight, probably will look like about 80% fat. But if you want to lose body fat, focus on getting enough protein. If you want to burn body fat, putting more fat on your plate isn't going to help you tap into those reserve tanks. All right, think about like a dirt bike. You got the reserve tank. You don't switch on that reserve tank unless you've emptied out your main tank. So if you put more fat in the mouth, you're not going to burn more fat from the body. Keto's not magic. You still got to be in what's called a calorie deficit to lose weight. But keto is very, very powerful for maintaining that deficit, for allowing us to eat less, for decreasing our hunger, maintaining stable blood glucose, decreasing inflammation, lowering insulin levels, improving metabolic flexibility. And this can be a very enjoyable and sustainable way that you can lose weight long term. It's about long term. So you can find more at primaledgehealth.com. Get off the computer, get off the social media, close your freaking Facebook account, and go live.